I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with the cattle market summary for the week ending April the 6th, where we've seen some topsy-turvy weeks and really volatile action in the cattle markets here for a long time, but this week might have taken the cake. We started out sharply lower, just like we ended up last week. They started selling fat cattle in the southern plains dollars and dollars lower, and then at the middle of the week we saw a lot of turmoil about the tariffs with China and that kind of standoff there, and it included soybeans, which sent the grains tumbling, which that boosted your feeder cattle and lent support to your fat cattle. And then we started seeing some late week trade in your fats that was back better a little bit after it had dipped even more during the early mid part of the week. And then after everybody thought all the trade was done, then we remembered that Colorado and western Nebraska still hadn't sold anything. And then they start selling cattle late on Friday, just $1.50 lower, so not too bad. But look at your board through the week. June live cattle, Monday started out down $1.62. Tuesday was down $1.32. Wednesday is when we saw it turn around and up $2.70. Thursday up $2.72. Friday took the $2.72 back off, ending the week with June live cattle at $102.32, down just a quarter for the week. So not too much losses there, although a lot of volatility through the week on your fat cattle futures. April spot live cattle ended the week at $112.22. That was down $1.53. And then we talked about August earlier in the week, thinking that they were undervalued because there hasn't been a lot of cattle selling feeder cattle wise to go on feed the last few weeks. And then this week we had very light receipts earlier in the week, and August ended at $102.57, which was actually up $1.10 for the week. Feeder cattle futures, May started out down $1.65. Tuesday was down $1.40, and then Wednesday, when the news come out about Trump going to put more tariffs on China, and then China coming back saying, well, if you're going to do that, we're going to put tariffs on hogs and soybeans at 25%. So then that was really bearish for your grains, sent them tumbling, and then lent a lot of support to feeder cattle. So Wednesday, your May feeder cattle were up $4.15. Thursday up another $2.92, and then Friday things settled back out and was down $2.42, with your May feeder cattle ending the week at $135.62, up $1.60 for the week. April ended at $135.32, and you go way out in October, we see some recovery there at $142.62 to end the week. Your fat cattle trade was hard to keep up with, but through Thursday they'd only sold 54,800 head. Did have some more trade on Friday, some cleanup sales in most all of your northern and southern plains, and just kind of continuing with what we had seen. But then late on Friday we saw Colorado and western Nebraska selling at $119.50, and you're not going to hear that reported a lot of places because most everybody had closed up shop. But that's where it ended, and that is a positive note leading into this coming week. But your live sales in the southern plains, they of course sold cattle early from mostly $117 to $118. So that it was $3 to $4 lower, and then you had a little bit later in that midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, starting trading in the northern plains, and Nebraska was way behind the eight ball, selling quite a few cattle at $114, $114.50. But then later on in the week they picked it up and started selling more cattle at $117 and mostly $118. And like I said, that Colorado western Nebraska trade at $119.50, but that was on Friday. So through Thursday, your weighted average on live steers was sitting at $116.33. So significant trade, less than $117. That would be down $4.64 compared to the weighted average the previous week. But that does not include that $119.50 trade and quite a bit more of $118 on Friday. So when we get into next week, we'll get the weighted average closeouts for everything of last week, and we'll kind of see where we stand. It's going to be better than that. Your dress sales ended through Thursday, $187.65 on the weighted average for steers. That was $4.68 lower than the weighted average from the previous week. Box beef cutout values finally started to taper off pretty significantly. So that's what's making your packers kind of get harder to trade with. But choice cutouts, they were kind of held their ground through the first part of the week, and they needed to move some products, so they put a lot of offerings out there and then started to sell it quite a bit lower, and ended up losing about as much ground as your select had, because it'd been selling off quite a bit lower and getting a big disparity between choice and select. But choice cutouts, the average trade for the week was $217.41. That was down $4.31, but that's a lot better than what your late week trade was, because on Friday afternoon your choice cutouts ended at $214.31. On selects, your average trade for the week last week was $207.58, which was better than the late Friday, which was $205.60, but that $207.58 was down $4.36 from the average trade of the previous week. But a good movement, heavy movement, 684 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter had been kind of lagging behind the previous week all week, but then come in with a monster Saturday, and of course that was in comparison to the Saturday before Easter the previous week, and so ended up being a big week, over 600,000, 615,000 expected for slaughter for last week. That's with a 44,000 head harvest on Saturday. That 615,000 was 21,000 more than the previous week and 37,000 more than the same week a year ago. Look at your feeder cattle markets, and they were just as volatile, if not more. But your real-time index on Beef Market Central, based on the 800-pound steer, laid on Friday to end the week at 135.59. That was actually up 60 cents from the end of the previous week, but started out Monday with your big high-volume sales hardly having any cattle at all. Oklahoma's National Stockyards only had 1,912 cattle for their sale, which is you never see that unless it's a holiday week or a big snowstorm or something, and neither of those happened. They tried to talk about cold temperatures, but those guys can still bring cattle in during the kind of temperatures they had. It wasn't like the snowstorms they had in the Midwest and the northern plains. It wasn't that bad. People were just too scared to bring their cattle in because they didn't know how much more lower it was going to be than what we had already seen. OKC West only ended up with a little over 3,000 cattle there for their two-day sale, Monday and Tuesday, but very light receipts, and they were selling them quite a bit lower. But then when we got in with that tariff deal and your grains down big on Wednesday, your Wednesday sales just turned around and were a bunch higher, and then Thursday sales were sharply higher. But after all the smoke cleared and everything, by the end of the week, we ended with your values kind of near steady, and your trends in the sales ending near steady with the previous week, recovering all the early week losses, but driving with some really eye-opening sales late in the week there. And look at the biggest eye-opener was in Pratt, Kansas on Thursday. They sold some thin, cut and two gant, I mean stalker type cattle with a lot of compensatory gain there. You have to take that into consideration, but my goodness, the price. 83 head of 648-pound stalker steers in Pratt bring $191.75, and that's $1,242 a head. We haven't seen anything like that for weeks, and it just seemed like after 2 days of the board being up, everybody thought this whole thing had healed up, but we're still in a bear market. You have to realize that we've got a big load of market-ready cattle coming here in just a couple of 3 weeks. The feedlots are full. And we haven't had a lot of receipts on feeder cattle, and even though we got light receipts of feeder cattle, the market has been plunging, and we've got a lot of ground to lose yet on your fat cattle trade, so we're in a bear market. But that $1,242 a head on those stalker steers to go out on grass, that was way better than any of these Friday individual quotes that I'm going to give you that were pretty impressive themselves. But in Lexington, Nebraska on Friday, they sold 58 head of 877-pound steers at $133. That's dollars better than we've seen for the last couple of weeks. Look at this quote out of Magnus Livestock Market in Huron, South Dakota. 65 head, a big load of 982-pound steers. That's scaring the heck out of 1,000 pounds at 125.10, but still that's only $1,228 a head. And in Bloomington, Wisconsin, which by the way is where your LMA World Champion Livestock Auctioneer contest is going to be held here in a couple of months, so Bloomington's going to be getting a lot of press coverage. But in Bloomington on Friday they had 54 head of 827-pound steers, bring 138 1/4. That's a look at your week's markets here on the road in Coleman, Alabama. We'll talk to you next week.